Welcome to Flunking the Written, a fully spoiled Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans break down every episode of the show. Join Kimberly and Megan every Tuesday as they overanalyze each scene and discuss the Buffyverse at large. Now let's meet up with the Scoobies and get into this week's episode of Flunking the Written.
What can I say? I flunked the written.
Alright, Kim, we are at Season 2, Episode 15, Phases. We are trucking along almost to the end of the season, it feels like. And this episode was written by Rob Des Hotel and Dean Batali, directed by Bruce Seth Green, and the blurb is, Buffy and her friends discover secrets about themselves as they battle a werewolf, its hunter, and their own emotions.
Well, that doesn't give anything away.
I know. I'm just impressed that they're not like, Oz is a werewolf in the first
Yeah, in the first sentence.
Yeah. Kind of a weird journey I had with this episode, because I remembered not liking it that much before I started it. And then I watched it and was really actually enjoying myself while I was watching it and had a good time. And then the episode ended and I thought about it for a few minutes. I was just like, I really don't like that episode.
Well, okay.
So I've been on an emotional roller coaster. You'd say that I am having a battle with my own emotions, much like the characters in this episode.
Well, my relationship with this episode, it is the very first one I ever saw. And it's the one, I mean, it's not one of the best episodes ever, but it's the one that made me a Buffy fan. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go with it's a good one and I like it.
Well, my very first episode that I watched was Smashed, and I am fully aware that that's not a great episode, but it will always hold a special place in my heart because it was my very first, full episode of Buffy.
Well, that's the way I feel about this one.
I completely understand that.
All the rest of the episodes I watched, as they aired.
Mm-hmm. So this episode begins with a lovely callback to one of my favorite Season 1 episodes, where Oz is looking at the statue of Catherine Madison and is just kind of rocking back and forth and staring intently into its eyes. It's just a great moment. And Willow comes up and kind of asks what he's doing, and he's just like,
this cheerleading trophy. It's like its eyes follow you wherever you go. I like it.
There's some nice continuity there.
But apparently the two of them went on a nice little date the night before. They went out to a movie. Mm-hmm. And they're both in very much that early dating awkwardness right now where they're not really sure what's the next step. And you kind of have just an awkward conversation that Willow eventually finds an opportunity to escape from when she sees Buffy and runs off.
Yeah. And then Larry comes up to talk to Oz, and we have a lot of high school sexual harassment happening.
Yep.
He is basically your stereotypical football jock jerk type guy on steroids. The way he talks about women and what he does stuff, which we find out later why he's acting that way. But,
yes.
Yeah.
It is definitely they cranked it up to 11.
Yeah.
And maybe a bit unnecessary. I was kind of shocked to realize that this was his second episode. He's only been in Halloween prior to this, if I remember correctly. And, in my mind, we had several episodes of Larry before he came out, so you kind of got used to him being the jerk. But no, it's just the two times that he's in, he just gets a lot of screen time, and he's definitely, that kind of overcompensating, closeted kid. But yeah, it's really, it was bad in Halloween, but it's a lot worse in this episode.
So, Oz, man, what's up with that? Dating a junior? Oh, let me guess. That little innocent schoolgirl thing is just an act, right?
Yeah. Yeah, she's actually an evil mastermind. It's fun.
I mean, she's got to be putting out. What's the point? What are you going to do? Talk?
And then we move to Willow and Buffy having a conversation where Willow is kind of complaining about Oz moving too slow.
Yeah.
And, she wants to smoochy. She wants kissing, and he's not picking up any of her hints.
Mm-hmm.
they move to talking about Buffy and how she's feeling about Angel. And Buffy says she wants to hang out with them tonight to kind of keep her mind off of it. And Willow has a very nice joke about Xander and him dating Cordelia, which is his phone number is 1-800 I'm dating a skanky hoe, which coming from Willow is very unexpected.
Yeah, I have a couple of issues with Willow in this scene.
Okay.
One is it seems like, especially coming off of Innocence and how hyper aware Willow was of Buffy in that episode, it seems really like just a misstep from the writers to have her have this whole rant about Oz in front of her. And I mean, she realizes it and she regrets it, but it just seems like Willow would totally be in tune with Buffy enough to know from the get-go that she doesn't need to be talking about her boyfriend troubles in front of her. I mean, it's a lot. And then I don't like the joke that she makes on Cordelia. I don't like the delivery of the meow line and everything that follows that. I just think everything of that's a little forced for me.
Willow saying it seems a little forced to me.
Yeah, and her being like
she
proud of it afterwards too. Like, it's just, I don't think the performance works very well. I don't know like what kind of layers they were going for there, but it's also, it just doesn't feel like something she would say. And there's a weird imbalance in this episode for me with Willow and Cordelia.
I kind of think I could see Willow being proud of it. That part makes sense to me, where she's like, "Oh, I've never gotten a meow before." That seems like Willow to me. The actual joke doesn't.
Okay. Yeah, of the two offenses, the joke itself is obviously the bigger offense in my mind. But I think the entire scene just doesn't, like this entire scene from beginning to end doesn't really work for me on a number of level. Oh my God, I can't speak.
I mean, I know Buffy and Angel are the big relationship and everything else, but we don't really know how much time has passed between Innocence and this episode. And I mean, it's obviously been enough time for a few dates. Xander and Cordelia's relationship has progressed, and apparently Oz and Willow's has a little bit too. So I don't know. I don't feel like Willow should not be able to talk about her life and her problems because of Buffy's, you know?
I mean, sure, she can talk about it, but it doesn't seem like something she would do. It just doesn't seem like that character to me. Like, she has every right to talk about that, but it just doesn't feel like Willow, right? Yeah. Because she, especially in Innocence, and you're right, some time probably has passed, but especially in Innocence, she is so very in tune with Buffy.
She is.
The Giles shut up line is definitely showing just how in tune she is with what Buffy's feeling.
Yeah. Well, after this scene, we move on to a scene where Cordelia and Xander are in Cordelia's car making out. And Xander is kind of obsessing about Willow a little bit. And Willow dating Oz. And I don't trust Oz. And what does she see in him? And basically just complaining about Willow dating someone.
Yep.
And Cordelia's like, chill out. Do you even want to be here with me? And says that he's, either talking about Willow or talking about Buffy. And she's tired of it. And she kind of reminds him that they're in a car alone to make out. So stop talking about other girls and let's make out. And so they do. And then we see outside the car and a very, very, very well done werewolf.
Oddly enough, this may be my favorite version of the werewolves. I think I like this version more than like when they had like the human faces later on in the series, honestly.
Yeah, the special effects in this episode they are not good.
No.
Like, I don't even know what to say about them except that they are not good.
Yeah. But they never really figured out how to do the werewolves are tough, man. They're tough.
Yeah, but this one seems especially bad. I'm sorry. It's just, especially when we have the scene where the werewolf morphs back into Oz. That was just horrible. It's just horrible. But yeah, they're making out, and then Xander's like, did you hear that? He hears something, and Cordelia's like, what now? And she has this line that I just think is hilarious and I laugh every time. And she's like, is Willow sending some kind of distress signal that only you can hear? And I love it. It's so Cordelia. And they start to kiss again. And he's like, oh, I heard something again. And it's actually kind of funny because it's usually like what the girl does, you know, that she heard something and she's nervous and scared. And the guy's pressuring her to make out. Yeah. It's kind of, the roles are reversed here. And Cordelia's like, okay, fine, we'll leave. And then a werewolf tries to break into the top of the car.
Yeah.
Basically, that's what happens. And, of course, they can't find the keys. Because, of course, that's what happens.
Because you wouldn't just leave them in the ignition when you're parking. Whoever would do that.
Of course you wouldn't. You would, take them out and put them somewhere. So they fumble around for the keys. They finally find the keys, and they reverse and knock the werewolf off, and then they drive off.
Yeah.
With a big hole in the top of the car.
I will say,
I'm still curious how she explains to her dad, you know.
I don't know. I mean, she says that it's her dad's vehicle, but then she just drives it into school the next day, and it's still got all that damage on it. So who knows? Maybe her dad just has so many vehicles, she can, like, hide it in the back, and he won't notice. I am going to shout out Cordelia again, though, on her driving skills. Apparently, when she's in, like, a fight-or-flight mode, she is an excellent, excellent driver. Because she did an excellent job in Prophecy Girl, and she did an excellent job getting out here.
Well, and she's not blind right now.
Yeah,
so.
But, you know.
You can always drive better when you can see.
She also, in Reptile Boy, just, like, rear-ended a car.
Oh, true.
So, from there, we cut to the next day at school, and Buffy is checking the roof of Cordelia's car, saying, are you sure it was a werewolf? And Xander details everything that leads to it being a werewolf and says, yeah, he's sure, and adds that it tried to bite them. And Cordelia, like, publicly leans against Xander, which is like...
I have totally got that in my notes,
like,
too. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a public display of affection there, Cordelia.
Which is weird, because we know that the Scoobies know. But it's a whole nother level of Cordelia accepting this relationship that she's willing to do that in front of the whole school.
Where anyone can see it.
Yeah. It's basically they're open at this point, because we know the next episode she has some of the fallout from their relationship being public. But man, it was just like a moment of just like, whoa.
And then she makes a complaint that she just had the car detailed. Which, personally, I don't really see what the issue is. Because, I mean, all the werewolf really did was put a hole in the roof. I mean, your car's still clean.
Yeah, but by the time you get that roof fixed, it's going to be dusty again. And you're going to have it detailed again. I get it.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Giles mentions that there were a lot of people who noticed a wild dog around town. And that there were dead animals. And Willow gets upset about bunnies. And I was informed her that bunnies can really take care of themselves. And I'm like, huh.
I wrote in my notes that this is the root of Anya and Willow's clashing later on.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with Xander. It's all just bunnies. They disagree about bunnies.
They talk about how tonight's the full moon. So it must have been the day before. And what?
I was looking through my notes, and I wrote this note down. I don't think I've ever, like, paused on this note before, but for some reason, this watch through, I just thought it was the funniest line ever. But when they're talking about the full moon, and Giles is just like, well, maybe what we, are told is wrong, and Cordelia's like, or it's a crock, or something like that. And then Xander says, unless the werewolf is using last year's almanac. And I laughed so hard at that line. I don't think I've ever paid attention to it before, but this time it got me.
Yeah. Well, they discuss how the werewolf might be back and they're going to have to catch it. And Giles, talks about how cool he thinks it is. And Buffy says he needs to get a pet.
Yeah. I do feel like that Giles should probably already know quite a bit about werewolves, though. And he doesn't seem to. I mean, the amount of times...
he has to research each new thing.
But what does he do in his free time? It's one of the classics. You think he'd looked up werewolves at this point.
And then the next scene is we're in gym class, And the gym teacher is informing them that Sunnydale is getting more dangerous every day.
Are they finally catching on?
Yeah. And that they're going to go into groups and practice self-defense skills. Buffy says that they should just all move away from the Hellmouth, but,
Yeah. Oz has a sweet moment of fixing Willow's tag, and Xander is again the worst and calls him out on it. I mean, like, really?
Really?
But then it leads to the second line that I've never really paid that much attention to, but caused me to laugh out loud this viewing, which is Cordy's, "I think you splashed on just a little too much obsession for dorks."
Then they tell everybody to get in their groups, and while they're getting in their groups, we have this very throwaway conversation about Larry mentioning that the bandage on his arm is because a huge dog bit him last week. And then Oz says, "I've been there," and holds up his finger and says his cousin Jordy bit him on the finger because he just got grown-up teeth.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing like 5 years old, 4 or 5. There's a little convo between Willow and Oz that was cut out of the script here, where Willow says it looks like it healed already, and Oz says the emotional scar is still there. Which I thought that was funny. So then we have the girl from the beginning that Larry sexually harassed, and he is in the group with her and Buffy.
Is it the same girl? I don't think it's.
Yes.
I don't.
It okay. So it's not the same girl, but it's supposed to be, and they're both named Teresa.
Really? So it's a different actress that played the one at the
in
beginning.
the script. It says that it is. It's supposed to be the same girl from the beginning, and they're both called Teresa, but obviously it's not.
Uh-huh.
We see them. It's
That's funny.
So
she had some kind of extreme makeover in the middle of the day.
yes. He proceeds to sexually harass her again, and she explains that there's a couple of them, and Buffy walks up, and then Willow reminds Buffy that she's supposed to be a normal girl.
No. The exact word she says is a meek little girly girl.
Yes.
It's very specific. And we've hit it on a couple of times, and we're going to hit on it a couple more times more, but there's some severe gender stereotypes in this episode. So that word is specific, and I wanted to make sure that was clear.
Okay.
I'll have things to say.
Right here before we finish the rest of the class, there is a couple of conversations cut out. We have Buffy who says, "Spoil my fun" to Willow.
Mm-hmm.
And then Xander walks up to Willow and Cordelia and tells them he's wearing a large helmet with padding over his head and tells them, "Be gentle with me." Cordelia looks at Willow and says, "You first. I wouldn't want to be accused of taking your place in line." And Willow says, "Oh, I think you pushed your way to the front long before this." Cordelia says, "Hey, I can't help it if I get the spotlight just because some people blend into the background." Willow says, "Well, maybe some people could see better if you weren't standing on the auction block shaking your wares." Cordelia, "Sorry, we haven't all perfected that phony girl next door bit." Willow, "You could be the girl next door too if Xander lived next to a brothel." Then they're
holy crap.
staring at each other, breathing heavily. Xander calls out to them. I guess, and he's supposed to be standing a little bit away, but he calls out to them and said, "Okay, who wants a piece of me?" Cordelia and Willow look at each other, and at the same time, Cordelia punches him and Willow kicks him, and they work together, taking Xander to the ground. And he looks up at them and goes, "Why?" So that whole scene was cut. Go.
Wow.
I've been waiting to read that.
That was painful.
Yeah.
It kind of tries to force the transition that doesn't really exist, where they decide that they're gonna like team up together and be like Xander is the worst club, and they talk later in the bronze. So that transition works a little bit, but they're super like awful to each other right before they team up against Xander, and I just don't buy that turn at all. I don't really buy the turn that we see in the show, but I definitely don't buy the freaking comparing Cordelia to a whore and all of that. Like, all of it's awful.
Yeah, my question is, where is Oz during this scene? Because he was right there earlier, and like, is he watching Willow act this way about Xander?
He's nursing his finger off to the side.
Yes, of course. But like, you would think he would, not be okay with her acting this way towards Xander.
There's a weird imbalance already about everybody's acceptance of this weird tension between Willow and Xander. I think Cordelia is way more lenient than I would be to Xander's ramblings about Willow. Like, she gets mad and she yells at it for him and complains and all of that stuff. But I'd be like, listen, dude, we're done. This isn't working out. And Oz has already talked about,
Yeah.
Oz has already talked about how Willow's trying to make Xander jealous. So the fact that, like, it's a lot. Yeah.
But yeah, they're very, very catty with each other.
Wow. So from there, we're actually to, like, the lineup where they're trying to flip the guys over them, right? It's all the girls, and then the guys are grabbing them from behind, and they're supposed to, like, kind of leverage them and knock them to the ground. And I guess Buffy's translation of being a meek little girly girl is just, like, moaning a lot, which apparently...
Yeah. That was weird how she did that.
But apparently it's enough to get Larry fake aroused and do, like, incredibly aggressive things. Like, I don't care how closeted you are. This is a lot, man.
What, he grabs Buffy's butt?
Yeah.
Which is our third instance of sexual harassment, not even counting the comments, just like physically. Is our third.
It's
yeah. At which point Buffy just like throws him over her head and slams him into the mat. And Oz says that works too, which, I mean, he's been there the whole time. So, like, I really wish we had gotten that scene just to know what Oz was doing during it. Like, I don't even want to see Cordelia and Willow act that way, because it doesn't seem right for either one of them.
Yeah.
But I want to see what Oz was doing.
Where was Oz?
Like, the look on his face.
Is he just, like, staring at this, being like, what the crap?
Right?
What have I gotten myself into? So, from there, we cut to the library on this gorgeous shot of this moon rotating around the globe, and it's like spinning around and revealing the Scoobies' faces. And I just wrote that I love that Giles brought out the globe for this. And then even later you see that he has a lamp that he's holding to represent the sun.
It's lovely. It's very lovely.
Oh, but through his lovely demonstration that he's providing to educate the Scoobies, he says that there's no real scientific explanation for it, but the phases of the moon have some sort of psychological influence, and the full moon is meant to reveal our darkest qualities. Xander makes a joke about moon pies, and Giles and Xander have a weird bonding moment.
Yeah.
It is like one of the worst jokes that Xander has made, and it's the one that gets Giles.
Yeah. It's very bad. They have a discussion about how werewolves act on pure instincts and they're aggressive and predatory, and that could be anyone who's been bitten by a werewolf. And they know that he'll be out that night.
Yeah.
And Xander suggests silver bullets, and Giles is like, no, it's still a human. And might not even know that he or she is a werewolf.
Yes.
And Buffy's like, okay, so we catch and bring them back alive.
Yep.
Yeah.
So here's the interesting thing. And I think this is where I'm going to have my conversation about the gender stereotypes of this episode, but there's many more examples, both before and after this scene. But in this moment where he's talking about how it acts on pure instinct, no conscience, predatory and aggressive, Buffy's like, typical male, right? And then Xander has that moment of, hey, on behalf of my gender. And that's when Giles explains that, yeah, it could be a female or whatever. The interesting thing is that you talk about that role reversal with Cordelia and Xander, and so you kind of have some underplayed moments throughout this episode, but then you have Larry and Kane, who are so aggressively, like, stereotypical misogyny.
Male.
Yeah. And then you have the quote
Opposite.
about being a meek little girly girl and the cat fighting, right? You know, even some of that was cut, but there's still enough in there that you can kind of see that there's some cattiness between Cordelia and Willow. So it's like two crazy opposite ends of the spectrum that they play around with a lot. And they don't really do anything great with this. Like, there's no real great message to be gleaned from this. It's just mostly this episode is about the different phases that people experience as teenagers, and, you know, ideas of going through puberty or being sexually awakened or being closeted and coming out. The different things that teenagers may experience are explored, but there's not really a uniform message when it comes to these weird gender stereotypes that they keep pulling out over and over and over again. What I will say, though, and it's not something that Buffy is solely guilty of, but because of the nature of the Slayer and the one girl in all the world and stuff like that, they really deal with these vast opposing ideas of what being a man and being a woman is, and it doesn't really mess at all with the spectrum of gender identity, right? And that's something that's really evolved a lot since Buffy, and you can't necessarily blame Buffy for it, but at the same time, Buffy's particularly egregious because of the Slayer line and the notion of that first wave feminism, right? Where it's basically like, you know, white cis feminism and doesn't really deal with all the other forms of femininity. So that's something that I think is a sour point for me in this episode, because it kind of it brings up those thoughts a lot because it's so egregious in how much it separates the genders and does this stuff. And I'll throw out, just because I think it's always good to get different perspectives and see all of the awesome stuff that people are creating about Buffy and the Buffyverse, but there is a video on YouTube by Going Rampant that actually discusses the transphobia of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, and some of the things that even subconsciously are kind of in there to reinforce those stereotypes and pick that apart. And it's a really solid video, and I think everyone should check it out. But yeah,
I'm going to have to go check that out.
Yeah. It's extreme in this episode, and I feel like it doesn't really have a message or any kind of reason to be there other than to just be like, men think they're better than women, haha, we'll show them. It's very black and white in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also going to throw out, in the script, when Giles says they may be completely unaware of his or her condition, does Buffy specifically say that we'll bring him back alive after that?
No, she says, so tonight we bring back alive.
Okay. Because I'm not sure.
You know, bring them.
Yeah.
Like apostrophe E-M.
Yeah. Because I'm not sure in the show if it's M or him, but I definitely heard it as him. But the other kind of thing that's played with in this is the humanity of the werewolf. Mm-hmm. And I think M still works, because that still kind of infers that it's a person and not a thing. But you'll notice at the beginning here, they're talking about the werewolf as if it's a person, using pronouns that we would use for a person. And then later, they start calling it a lot.
I think they start doing that after they suspect that it has injured or like killed somebody.
Yes, and I think that there's like a specific reason for that. But this was the first example that I was thinking of where they were specifically talking about it as if it were human. And then later on, they make it more and more monster.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense, though, because they suspect that it's killed Teresa.
Yes. Well, and I think it's part of...
Yeah,
and I think it's part of Buffy's way of potentially coming to terms with the fact that she may have to kill it, you know?
Yeah.
Because that's when she really starts talking about killing it, she refers to it as it instead of him or her or anything like that. So from there, it's Buffy and Giles kind of patrolling around Lover's Lane, and Buffy has all the hot gossip which is another
Yes,
kind of
but
stereotypical girl thing.
Well, and see, I have in my notes, I wasn't even thinking about it that way. I have it in my notes that it's just like a little quick reminder that Buffy is, in fact, a high school girl.
Mm-hmm.
She is in high school. She's a 17-year-old girl who wants to talk about the gossip and who's making out with who and stuff, which developmentally is completely normal. And it's just kind of a little reminder that even all the stuff that she's gone through with Angel recently and then hunting a werewolf and all that, she's still a teenage girl.
Yeah, I'm actually going to look it up. I normally don't bother to look up the air dates, but I'm actually going to look it up to see. When this aired. Okay, so this aired January 27th.
Well, I knew it was at the very beginning of a year because I remember when I watched it.
Yeah, so this did air just a week after Innocence. So here's the thing, is that you can kind of buy like a certain amount of time has passed for Buffy and Friends, and it could even be weeks. Who knows, you know? You can make it whatever it is. But I think the thing that's jarring watching this after Innocence, and we're watching this just a couple days after Innocence on our recording schedule.
Well, I watched it the same night.
Oh, yeah. So I just felt like it was too much of a shift. And we have some emotional beats later, and we had that slight emotional beat earlier. But having Buffy just kind of cavalierly talking about relationship drama at school feels weird coming off of Innocence.
Well, Buffy's birthday. When is Buffy's birthday?
It changes.
I feel like I should know this. It's always like, isn't it like November?
So, according to the wiki, it's January 19th. I think it has shown different dates in like things earlier in the series, but I think the date on her grave is what people base it off of. Quick research break.
Yeah. Which, I mean, this happened right after her birthday, so.
Oh, her grave doesn't even have a date. It just has years. I should know that. I was starting to think that, and I was just like, no, I know they base it off of something that's very official, but I don't know what it is that they base it off of. But I know, like, in I, Robot You, Jane, it's got, like, 2 separate dates listed for her birthday, and neither one of them are the January date that we have come to know to be actually her birthday.
Yeah, and it seems like her birthday episode would always air around November. To me, that's vaguely what I remember, but I could be completely wrong about it.
Yeah, I mean, this time around, I guess Surprise probably aired in January, because, yeah, it would have aired the day before Innocence, and Innocence definitely aired in January, so. But I don't know on later seasons. I think they try to get it around the same episode count, more so than they try to get it around the same time of year.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Okay, I just thought it might give us a clue.
Yeah, but it does, like, going back to the conversation at hand, it does feel like, for us as an audience, it's jarring, because we're still emotionally reeling from, like, what happened to Angel, right? Like, this is the love story that we've been following, and it's just like, now we're back to silly antics and Buffy gossiping about who's kissing who, and it just seems like, ugh, what's going on? But in a way, you kind of need that levity, and I understand, but it is harsh as an audience to be like, but we want to know what's going on with Angel. Why aren't we paying attention to the fact that Angel's evil? What's going on with Angel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does seem odd. And I can imagine seeing them for the very first time. You spend this entire episode wondering where Angel is and what he's doing.
Yeah. When are Buffy and Angel going to interact again, right? Like, when are they going to see each other? And they don't.
When I watched this episode, I had no idea who Angel was.
So from there, they basically split up again, and Buffy gets trapped in a net.
Yes.
And then this guy shows up. I wrote bad words in my notes that I can't say on podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, Kane shows up.
Yes, his name on here is Gib Kane, and for those that don't know, he actually played the demon on Angel that was Sanju.
Oh, I know who you're talking. I have to
The
think of
one that was
Shahjahan.
Incorporeal?
I think it's Shahjahan.
Shahjahan.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. This is the guy who played him, that reoccurring demon. The one who Connor was prophesied to kill.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, he's a lot more enjoyable in that role.
Yeah, well, when I was watching this episode, I was like, he is familiar. He is in this show another time. And then I was like, nope, he's in Angel. I know this guy's in Angel. He plays something. And so I looked it up. So I didn't know it off the top of my head. I had to look it up.
Yeah, I didn't know it at all.
But
That's
that's
cool.
who it was.
Yeah, it's a hat trick. The Buffyverse is famous for its hat tricks.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Kane is very, very macho. Lots and lots of toxic masculinity.
Yep.
He basically is a werewolf hunter. He kills them and collects their teeth to make a necklace.
Yeah, and apparently werewolf pelts are worth a ridiculous amount, and I've seen that werewolf up close in this episode. It is not attractive fur. I don't know why it's valuable.
Well, they want them in Sri Lanka. They're not worth a lot here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different aesthetic over there, I guess. I don't know.
Giles shows up to help Buffy, and Kane has several comments about an old man like Giles dating a teenage girl like Buffy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They inform Kane that they are also hunting a werewolf, and he thinks that's hilarious and laughs. And Buffy, like, when she finds out that he kills them, Buffy's like, it doesn't bother you that werewolves are people 28 days out of the month. Kane, I like this comment. It cracks me up. But he says, that's why I only hunt them the other 3.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I'm sorry, I found that funny.
Yeah.
Then Kane asks where else the teenagers might be getting together, and says that the werewolves are attracted to sexual heat.
Mm-hmm.
At which point Buffy and Giles leave for the Bronze. And then we see Teresa, who is walking down the sidewalk at night by herself, which...
Apparently she didn't take anything from that self-defense class.
Exactly. And every time this happens, I'm going to point out that this is not a good idea in Sunnydale. She hears something and starts to, walk quicker, and then hears a growl and starts to run, and then runs into Angel, who is like, are you okay? He's a gentleman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He offers to walk her home, and he's like, I know you, right? You go to school with Buffy. And Teresa relaxes because she's like, oh, he knows Buffy, so I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
And they leave to Angel to walk her home.
Yeah. This is an unintentional way of showing just how easy it is for, I guess, attractive people, quote unquote, societally accepted attractive people to get away with being predators. Because he is all kinds of shady, but he's attractive, and he has that other connection that we always hear, is that statistically you're going to be assaulted or hurt by somebody that you know or have a connection, rather than just some stranger on the street. That is much more likely that it's going to be someone you know. So here he has, Buffy. So it's just like all of those weird red flags. But yeah, like, it just happens that Angel's hot, and so it's easier to trust him because he's attractive, and that's...
While I completely agree that is true, and it is way easier to get away with things or to get things or pretty much anything if you're attractive. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really see that in this scene. I mean, it could be that. I just thought it was he tells her the thing about Buffy, and so she immediately is like, okay, I trust Buffy, so I trust you.
And that's the other layer of, like, people are also, it's just coming off of the...
But yeah, he is weird in this scene.
Yeah. Coming off of the sexual harassment, defense class, whatever kind of, all the things that they should have discussed in that class. There's several red flags here that I think that she should have been aware of. One is just the fact that she's out alone at night is the first thing that she didn't pay attention to. But surely if that class was actually taught in the way that any of those classes that I have heard or been to before, one of the first things they say is that usually it's somebody that you have a connection with. It's a friend of a friend. It's someone you've seen at parties, somebody like that. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of person who's going to take advantage of you.
Yep.
This episode does so much of like just cramming in all of these ideas, but it does so very little with any of them.
Yeah. So then we go to the bronze and we have Cordelia and Willow sitting on one of the little couches talking to each other. And they're discussing guys.
Yeah.
And Cordelia's issues with Xander and Willow's issues with Oz.
Yeah.
And they're both being very sympathetic to each other and bonding. Yeah.
I love this moment in isolation. If I think about it with other stuff that's led up to this point, the skanky hole line, the Cordelia complaining about Willow in the car, even without the blow up back and forth at the self-defense class, I think
that was cut out. Yeah,
I think this is still like too much of a 180 for me for them to be in this moment. But
it's too fast.
If I take this moment in isolation and just enjoy Cordelia and Willow complaining about Xander and Oz, I really enjoy this moment.
What's his problem? Oh, that's right, he's a guy.
Yeah, him and Xander, guys.
What do they think they are?
A couple of guys.
Which when we were watching it, it scans the band playing, and at first I was like, "Is that Oz's band?" Because for some reason I thought it was, and I had to rewind and watch it again because I was like, "There's a little hint if that's Oz's band playing and he's not there." That's a little. Ooh, we should have noticed that, but it wasn't.
This band is Lotion.
Okay.
Which I was able to guess before I even looked it up because there are literally like posters and stickers plastered everywhere on the bronze later on that just says Lotion. I'm just like, that's a weird thing. And then I thought about it, I was like, I bet that's the band that was playing. But yeah, they are the super 90s alternative band Lotion. And the song that they are playing is Blind for Now.
And then all of a sudden, a werewolf crashes down in front of them.
Where did he come from?
Cordelia.
We don't know.
Yeah, from upstairs, apparently.
Nobody noticed. Nobody noticed him up on the balcony. He was just like shifting through there real quiet and creepy like.
Yeah. They take off running, and then we see kids pouring out of the bronze and Buffy and Giles coming up. And they're like, oh, yep, your hunch was right. Let's go in. And Willow comes running out and says, the werewolf is in there. And there's this little thing that's cut out that I have questions about because I never thought about it before now. But Cordelia, as she's running out of the bronze, looks at the doorman and says, you could be a little more discriminating with that velvet rope. As she keeps going. And it occurred to me that sometimes there's a doorman and sometimes there's not.
Yeah.
And why?
Why
there's sometimes and not? Is there because a point in Sunnydale where you're going to have to turn people away from the bronze because it's too full? I mean, do we really need a doorman / bounce? Well, I guess I could see where we would need a bouncer.
Yeah.
But then again, he'd have to be supernatural to ever do anything. I'm just saying. But when she says that, I'm like, there's a doorman tonight. Yes, sometimes there is. Sometimes there's not. Wonder why. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think on a rare occasion, I can think of an example in season 7 where there's a legit exclusive nightclub that also just suddenly happens to be in Sunnydale, but there's a legit exclusive nightclub that has a line that has a velvet rope and a bouncer that is just there, but that is definitely not the bronze. The bronze is yeah, we're in this random warehouse.
Yeah.
We just hire local bands and sell booze and it works out. I hadn't ever. I know that there's been a couple of times where they've talked about a bouncer or there's been a bouncer on screen, but it is funny. I just assume either different managers or the fact that the bouncers probably have a very short life expectancy too, and it takes them a while to find a new one.
Someone willing to do that job.
It's amazing that they even get bands to go and play there after.
Everything that happens, yeah.
So my funny note of this is that everybody's running out in a panic, and you can see what I understand now is the bouncer shut the door as soon as Buffy runs in. He just seals her in.
Yeah. And then Willow, as she's running out, also yells, "It went upstairs," which is weird because it came from upstairs.
Oh, does she? I didn't even notice that.
So apparently it
went upstairs,
dropped down and roared at them, and then jumped back upstairs. Or something, I don't know.
Yeah, Buffy's inside the bronze. She's looking for the werewolf. This is where I saw all the lotion posted everywhere and was very confused. And she kind of goes around the side and into the backstage area and then walks out onto the stage. The bass drum is suddenly sideways. No continuity there at all, but when she was out in the main part, it was standing upright, and then on the stage, the bass drum is sideways. And the werewolf, again, just pops out of nowhere. And they start to fight. Buffy wraps a chain around it immediately, but it breaks free and jumps out the window, and then we immediately cut back to this guy.
Yes,
Kane just being the worst. You let it get away.
Yeah. And then he is not even trying to pretend anything. He says, "This is what happens when you let a woman do a man's job."
I tell ya.
Giles kind of like, "Hey, you can't even find it," and she risked her life. And then he tells Buffy it's her fault if it gets hurt, or it's her fault if anybody gets hurt, which I don't really see, because I mean, I could see him feeling that way if like he had it and she interfered and it got away, but like she didn't really do anything to let it go that wouldn't have happened anyway. You know,
See, this is one of the storylines that I actually kind of like in this episode.
Okay.
Because it's really interesting coming off of innocence and the choice she made to not kill Angel at the end. And I think that's more what they're playing up in this, is that werewolf harms anyone, it's on you. I hope you can live with that. And she replies, "I live with that every day." Part of Buffy's job is that responsibility of when people die and when she doesn't catch the vampire in time, she has a little bit of twinge of guilt because, you know, it's her responsibility, all that weight of the world on her shoulders and all that nonsense that she has to deal with.
Yeah, and she has major guilt about Angel
and
not being able to kill him. But he's still wrong. Like, Kane is still wrong about the werewolf situation.
Yeah, Kane's a jerk. And that's fine, because he is, in fact, the villain saying things that hurt the hero. And that's what villains are supposed to do. This is the only way in which I feel that Kane is effective. Him just being like, "Oh, you're a girl," that's not effective. Buffy doesn't care about that. But saying that this werewolf got away because of you, and now anybody that gets hurt because of that, that's on you, that's effective against Buffy.
Right, except it's not true. Like, nothing that happened that Buffy did affected the werewolf and what it would have done that night. You see what I'm saying? She tried to catch it and it got away, but she didn't keep Kane from catching it.
Right, but she didn't catch it herself, and she wasn't willing to just put it down like Kane would have been willing to. That's what he's saying. She tried to catch it, whereas now, had Kane been the one to find it and put it down, then it wouldn't be out there harming other people. That's the angle he's trying to play at.
Yeah, I guess. I don't really see it as her fault.
Well,
I don't really see how he can twist it to be her fault.
Oh,
put it that way.
It works. It's effective. Buffy talks about it.
Well, because Buffy's always feels guilty about something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just part of her life.
Yeah. But I think this is the only way in which Kane is effective. I think every other aspect of him is terrible. I don't think he adds anything to the story, but he brings up this interesting discussion point that Buffy's dealing with constantly right now, is the fact that she had an opportunity to kill Angel last episode, and she didn't. And now every life that Angel takes is on her hands. She feels that.
And I get that. And I completely understand what you're saying, and I get what they were trying to do with it. I just think he's wrong. I'm sorry. I just think he's wrong.
So anyway, they all just kind of leave. And while people are casually cleaning up the bronze, no police in sight. You know, normal Sunnydale stuff.
No police in Sunnydale that actually do stuff unless it's at the school.
Or unless a robot falls down Buffy's stairs and then there's all the police.
Yeah.
And then we cut to the werewolf in the alley following a fresh trail of blood. And then we have Angel and the werewolf pissing contest.
Which is weird, and I don't see the point, but, Angel hisses at the werewolf, and it growls back, and they face off, and then Angel backs away.
Yeah.
Which I guess is to make us aware of how dangerous the werewolf is.
I guess. Maybe. But it's horrible. Everything about this is horrible. One, it's unnecessary. We don't need the werewolf near this scene at all. It's just a scene that doesn't have to exist. If you cut this scene out, it doesn't really change anything about the episode other than confirming earlier than we get confirmed had this scene not been here that it definitely wasn't the werewolf to kill Teresa. But we could piece that together because we last saw Angel and Teresa together. I mean, it's pretty clear that Angel was the one to kill her.
It's completely unnecessary scene.
So, but then it gives this weird situation where the werewolf, this instinctual predator who craves freshly killed meat, leaves Teresa completely unharmed.
Maybe she's too dead, or because she doesn't have blood, or
later on he is face to face with Willow. He is face to face with Willow and passes her up because there is like produced in a factory meat product that is used as bait to attract it.
Maybe he likes his food processed.
It's an American werewolf. That's the problem.
It's an American werewolf. Yep. Okay. The next scene is Giles sitting in his car listening to the news.
The way that I listen to the news, which is falling asleep.
Yeah. And then Buffy runs up to the car. She's all panicked and she's like, oh, I didn't see you. Because, she looked at the car, didn't see Giles, so she got worried about him. He's okay. They talk about not being able to find the werewolf. And Giles is like, it's morning. We should head home. Or, I guess, head to school. Nobody is sleeping tonight. And then they hear on the radio that Teresa, and her name apparently is Klusmeyer.
Wow. I didn't pay attention to that.
So, Teresa Klusmeyer has been killed. And they say it's possibly connected to animal mutilations.
Mm-hmm.
So now Buffy is like, uh-oh, the werewolf killed someone I know.
Yep.
And Giles is like, we can't do anything right now. The werewolf isn't a werewolf anymore because the sun is coming up. And then we switch to a scene that's just horrible. It's so horrible. It's a werewolf laying in the woods, curled up under a tree, and then we slowly watch it morph into Oz. And it's so bad. I'm sorry. I can't convey how bad this is. Oz is now in the woods, has just turned from a werewolf back into himself and is naked in the woods and goes, whoa. Because that's a very Oz thing to say in that situation.
So, I didn't mention it earlier, but I'm going to mention it here. I find it funny how just, open with information people are in this episode. Because we cut to this scene where Oz is just point-blankly asking his aunt if Geordie is a werewolf. Which she confirms, and it's all apparently open information at this point, so, you know, not everybody.
I have questions.
Buffy earlier also talking to Kane is just like, we're hunting a werewolf. Just spits it out there, and I'm just like, whoa, Buffy, what kind of cover are you trying to do here?
Well, I mean, she does say that he won't believe her.
Yeah, but it's just...
Yeah.
Everybody's just so open about this werewolf thing.
So, okay, Oz on the phone with his aunt asking if Geordie is a werewolf.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of listens and nods and goes, uh-huh. And how long has that been going on? Uh-huh. Just kind of like if you're asking, if your cousin has a stomach virus or something, and has passed it to you. I want to know more about this family and his cousin Geordie.
Yeah.
I have questions.
Oh, I have lots of questions about Oz's family.
Family of werewolves? Jordy's mom and dad, are they werewolves? Did Jordy get bit by a werewolf playing in the backyard? How do they handle their 5-6-year-old son turning into a werewolf? Have they taken him to the doctor? What'd the doctor say? Like, did they have to, like, change their identity so their kid didn't get taken by the government? Like, so many questions. And then in later episodes, Oz is trying to find out about himself and learn about being a werewolf and stuff. Why doesn't he just go to his aunt, uncle, and his cousin Jordy?
Yeah.
Who is apparently a werewolf. And, like, very matter-of-factly.
We skipped the very dark episode in Oz's life where that family just implodes.
Apparently. Because then Oz hangs up the phone. And he's like, oh, well, no reason I was asking. Love to Uncle Ken. And it's just like, no, this, if that was me, there would be way more conversation happening. It just, yeah, it's way too simple.
I just imagine everybody in Oz's family is exactly like Oz. They only speak in like 1 or 2 word sentences at all times.
I'd still have questions. It's a werewolf in the family. I'd still have questions. And like, if Aunt Maureen and Uncle Ken knew Jordy was a werewolf, because apparently it's not a secret, and he bit Oz, why wouldn't they prepare Oz? I'm like, okay, so at the next full moon, some stuff might happen. If it does, call us. You know, I mean, anything? Okay. So, yeah, that was a lot of my questions about that scene. It's a hilarious scene. I just lots of questions.
Oh, I love this show. It's a great show.
Okay. So later that morning, we're at the school, and Oz walks into the library, and Buffy and Giles are talking about the werewolf. Buffy is, I let that thing get away. I should have killed it. Mm-hmm. And this is the point where they start talking about it like it's a thing and not a person.
Makes it easier to kill it as well.
Yeah. And Oz is like, wait, what? Killed somebody? You know, and then they tell her that Teresa was killed. And Oz is kind of in shock because, like, he thinks that's him.
Yeah.
You know.
I do like, I mean, Seth Green's acting in this is it's more subtle than what we normally get, but I do like the idea of him. He's absorbing the room while also, like, completely being in his own headspace. And he does that really well of that. Yeah. Like, you can tell he's kind of hearing the words and he perks up at certain things, but he's also just so, like, processing all of this internally. And you can just see it, like, the gears working in his head of what he's possibly done and what he's feeling. This is the kind of stuff that I wish we had a little bit more of when it came to Oz's character. You get this on occasion, the dark side of the werewolf, the loss of control and these kind of story arcs with him. But a lot of times he's just kind of there to be the perfect boyfriend for Willow, and you don't get these deeper layers of Oz. I'd really be interested to see what they would have done with Oz had they kept him longer and he had been in more of the adult, like, darker seasons. With his predicament. I imagine they would have taken him some incredibly dark places and really done some interesting stuff with Oz. And I think it has been confirmed, I'm not 100% on this, but I think it has been confirmed that he would have been the one killed by Warren had he stayed in the show.
Oh, wow. So they were always going to have Willow's love killed.
Yeah, I think that was always the plan to be the catalyst for Dark Willow was to be her losing her true love or whatnot. But yeah, Oz, you get a little tidbit of really interesting stuff from him here and there, and I wish they did just a little bit more with it. So, Take Charge Xander enters, and it's talking about how they have to find the werewolf, and Oz is like, there's no way to know who it is, and Xander's like, well, Giles knows stuff, and I'm practically an expert on the subject. Which Willow's just like, oh, because you were that hyena that one time? And he's like, yeah, I know what it's like to crave the taste of freshly killed meat, to be taken over by those uncontrollable urges, and this is when Buffy calls him out, and thank God.
Yeah, I thought you didn't remember anything about that.
And I will say, as much as I kind of, like, just can't stand Xander, and in this episode particularly, he really gets on my nerves a lot, this little bit of acting, where he, like, giggles nervously, and then, like, realizes what he's done, and then forces the conversation onward, is just brilliantly acted. And I enjoy the performance of it. I hate the character, but this performance where he's just like, oh man, I just screwed up really bad. I gotta move on fast. Also, Tony's bit of acting in the background is quite amusing. I'm not sure if you watched Anthony Stewart Head at all.
I didn't, but I'm now going to have to go back and do that.
Because he's the other one that was kind of aware that Xander had that memory. And you could kind of almost... I'm not sure if this was how he was acting it, but I choose to believe where he was just like, don't drag me into this. Don't drag me into this. It's just a little bit of nervous, like, please.
Which begs the question, do the other teenagers who were possessed by a hyena, where are they? Do they remember eating the principal? How are they doing with that?
Still terrible, I'm sure.
Are they getting enough therapy? Or,
I'm sure they're all still happily residing in padded cells, because holy crap, I don't know how else you would recover from that. Xander closes his eyes and becomes the big bad wolf, and like just kind of embodies everything it is to be a werewolf, and talks through all of the things that he's feeling. And then when he gets to Predator, he like pops his eyes open. It's just like, oh, it's so obvious. And Oz is kind of panicked, but then he says, it's Larry. It's clearly, I'm Larry.
And you see Oz, if anyone was paying real close attention to Oz in this scene, they might suspect something, because there is like vivid relief on Oz's face. And you know, Oz isn't the most expressionist person, so
yeah. Like anything that his face does, you're like, whoa, I didn't realize he could do that.
Yeah. So Xander decides he's gonna go talk to Larry and get a confession.
Mm-hmm.
And
as soon as he leaves, Giles is like, good, now on to the actual work. I mean, that's not what he says, but that's totally how it comes across.
He says, good, go. In the meantime. Yeah. And Willow is checking the student files and says, check and see if anyone fits the profile. Mm-hmm. But like, what is the profile? Is there a profile?
Like he just said, like the person themselves may not even know.
Right. And has nothing to do with the werewolf.
Yeah.
So like, what profile are we looking for? Then he goes in his office and Buffy follows him, and we've got Willow and Oz. And Willow's like, are you okay? And yeah, he says he's trying not to think about it. And she's like, well, you can help me. Sometimes it's good to help. And he's basically like, I can't, I'm busy, and leaves. And she's kind of confused because he was a little abrupt. Mm-hmm. And then we go to Xander and Larry talking to each other in the locker room. Mm-hmm. Which, you go ahead.
All right, I'll talk about this scene. Yeah, so the locker room, and it's famous for terrible things happening. You kind of get this weird Larry walking through the locker room and then gets startled by Xander, which we knew Xander was going to see Larry, so it just seems like one of those decisions that the director made in the spot, being like, oh yeah, this is a horror show, we gotta have at least a little bit of a jump scare here or there. And Xander is just like really laying in the pressure immediately. He knows his secret, he knows what he's been doing at night. And Larry like threatens him, and Xander's like, hurting me isn't going to make this go away. You know, people will find out.
This is weird because Giles has already said that the werewolf might not even know.
Yeah.
So we're kind of on the assumption that not only does Larry know he's the werewolf, but he does this on purpose and went after Teresa on purpose, even though none of that is what Giles has described as a werewolf so far in the episode.
Yeah. It's such a ridiculous scene set up for this like payoff. And Larry's story arc in this episode, which I guess you could kind of go back to Halloween, but like in Halloween, he was very much a standalone character who, like, honestly, here's the thing about Larry. In Halloween, he was the bully to Xander that Buffy beat up, right? And then Xander, as his soldier self, got to beat him up and have that catharsis. But you have that moment, and then you have the moment this episode where suddenly Buffy has to pretend to be a meek little girly girl, and he's super aggressive with Buffy, who he knows can beat him up.
Because she has beat him up before.
He has done that. So already horribly inconsistent, but they, like, way ramped up his toxic masculinity, just aggression that he has to have not only the werewolf fake out, but then this reveal that he's a closeted gay kid. And so, you know, he has all of this things like, you know, you want hush money, like, do you have a cure? That kind, like, just terrible stuff to say when you think back about, like, it not being in the context of a werewolf, but in fact being in context of a gay kid.
And also, I feel like Larry accepting that Xander knows his secret and then admitting his secret, which is that he is gay, happens very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And he comes to this conclusion that I'm going to admit this very, very quickly for a teenager in the 90s.
Yeah.
Even the late 90s.
For one that's this aggressive, trying to prove that he's not, to be willing to say it, and then to have that such relief and like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever... And then, like, his personality completely changes at the end of the episode. He's completely a different character. It's just, none of it works.
None of it's believable.
It's just complete polar opposites.
This scene, this is not a coming out scene.
No.
That is believable.
But then, you also get the other reason to hate Xander for this episode, of the many other reasons. I mean, there's a lot. But his complete gay panic that he has after this scene.
Yeah.
That just consumes him for, like, the rest of the episode.
And yes, that it's wrong and you don't like it and everything. But again, for a teenage boy in the late 90s, it's pretty normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I mean,
but we've
got to remember, this was like 22 years ago.
Yeah. Xander's storyline is more believable than Larry's storyline. But both storylines bother me, and they both exist to have this werewolf fake out that doesn't need to happen, because we, the audience, has already seen that the werewolf is Oz.
And both of them are very, very dated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It very much feels like, hey, this is a 90s show about teenage kids, and we have to put these two storylines in here somewhere, so might as well shoehorn them in this episode. That's what it feels like.
You know, this was like 1998, right? This season. So this was the same year that Will and Grace aired for the first time.
Yeah.
You know, it was, I believe Dawson's Creek was on the air, but it was just starting, and was not to the storylines of the teenage boy who came out.
Yeah.
You know, it...
Oh, no, I get it. That's why I said earlier when I was talking about Buffy being transphobic, I said, like, the amount that they had to fight to get the gay representation that they got in this show, the amount that they had to fight to have a single girl-on-girl kiss in this show, I mean, yeah, this is definitely a show of its time, and is definitely a representation of how much things have changed in the last 20 or so years.
Oh, yeah. This scene here with Larry and Xander would never...
Yeah, it would not play today at all.
Oh, no. And people would immediately complain and object. Complain is not the word I meant. People would immediately object to this scene if it was aired in a show today. So
yeah, basically, they wrap things up, and Larry says that he'll keep Xander's secret.
Yeah, because he assumes that Xander is also gay.
And
it doesn't occur to him to wonder why Xander is insistent that Larry comes out
and then isn't willing to come out himself.
never ever mentions it again or talks to him about it or anything.
I mean, he's in a pretty open relationship with Cordelia.
Yeah. Anyway. Okay, so then we're back to the library, and Willow and Buffy are talking, and Buffy's like, does anyone fit the werewolf profile? And Willow's like, yeah, you. Aggressive behavior, run-ins with authorities, violent incidents. And again, like, that's not really a werewolf profile, because it might be somebody who doesn't know, and they also have no control over it. Like, it could easily be Willow.
Yeah.
You see what? I'm like, they've completely done a 180 on this original lore about a werewolf.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're looking for someone who's violent and aggressive.
Yeah.
Like, what?
It's because Xander did that bit where he became the wolf, and he was just like, oh, it has to be Larry because he's aggressive. And so everybody got stuck on that. Because of all of Xander's experience, you see.
Willow mentions about she can't figure Oz out because he had to go, and she can't figure him out. And Buffy's like, welcome to the mystery that is men.
Mm-hmm.
Then gives Willow the advice, you know what? You go to him, you make the first move. And Willow says that doesn't make me a slut, which, really?
Really? Yeah.
Like, you really? You go make the, like, you're going to kiss him. And you're Willow. I'm assuming it's just like a little peck on the lips is what you're going to do. And you're worried that makes you a slut. Really, Willow? Come on now. That was a horrible question.
Oh, yeah. Can I just complain about this scene in general? I'm going to complain about this scene coming off of Innocence again. Because here she's just like, Buffy's all like, man, right? Aren't they the worst? They grow body hair and lose all ability to tell you what they really want. But that's not what happened with Angel. It's not like they just had a bad breakup and Angel just kind of like became a jerk of his own free will. Like, he literally lost his soul, his compass for morality and anything that is good.
Yeah.
But she's all just like, men are the worst. And I'm just like, no, honey, your situation is the worst. But your situation does not apply to all men. I hate to tell you this. But it just read really weird to me.
Yeah, it does. It's a weird scene.
Yeah.
There are several awkward scenes in this episode. I mean, it's the scene that got me, and I can't really remember, like, what I thought about it. And,
yeah.
Like,
I can tell you
for a couple of very specific moments, but it was the one that made me start watching it, so I must have enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it's not.
I made sure the next week to sit down and watch the next episode, and after a couple, I was hooked.
Yeah, it's not unenjoyable. Like, when I'm watching the show and not thinking about too much of it, when I'm watching this episode, there is several conversations, kind of back and forths, and just, silly moments that I really enjoy, and it was fast-paced enough and kept me going, and I got through the end of the episode, and I was just like, there was some enjoyable stuff, and then I started thinking about all of the weird messaging in it, and all of the different notes that I had taken that didn't really go anywhere, and I was just like, no, that episode's just a big old mess.
Well, I was a freshman in college, so I would have been 18, and I probably didn't really think that much into it.
Yeah,
Except
and you definitely didn't have we're coming off of Innocence. The biggest issue with this episode is it's the episode after Innocence, and so many people are invested in that storyline, and so much of what Buffy's doing here feels weird. It feels the only way I could maybe excuse it, headcanon something, is that this is Buffy overloaded with emotions. And so she's just like doing all the things rather than dealing with any, like, she has that one moment later after Teresa attacks her where you really see Buffy's actual, like, this is what I'm feeling. But I think she may be trying to present her feelings in different ways. So instead of feeling sad about Angel, she's gonna feel like men are the worst. Or instead of feeling sad about Angel, she's gonna be like, well, let's get into, like, the high school drama and gossip. Rather than dealing with her emotions, she's just trying to figure out ways to push them down and have other things distract her. But that's not really in the episode. It just feels weird.
Yeah.
So they go out into the hall, and Willow's talking about how it used to be so much easier to tell if a boy liked you because he'd just punch you on the arm and run back to his friends, to which Xander, who's running up to his friends, punches Buffy on the arm, which is a moment I actually really enjoy. It is a joke that if you're not looking at the screen at that moment, you'll miss out on, and those are the best jokes.
And then Willow has this comment where she has to go to class because Cordelia asked me to look over her history homework. I think that means I might have to do it. And she wanders off. But, like, Cordelia's a good student. Like, she's been a good student this whole time.
Yep.
So it doesn't make sense that now she wants Willow to do her homework for her. I mean, the only thing that really shows she's not a good, like, she wasn't good at doing her work and make good grades was that science fair thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Which, to me, that still supports that she's a good student, because there are two different types of students. There are the types of students who are like the crazy, crazy overachievers, like Willow is. And then there's the type of students who are like, what do I have to do? That's the minimum amount that I have to do to get the grade.
Yeah.
Which is definitely the student I was. I was just like, if I do this much and it can pass the class, I'm cool. That's the way I approached any class that I didn't have like an interest in college. Any of those classes I was just forced to take, I was just like, I will just do what I think is the bare minimum to get through this class, and it worked out.
So Buffy and Xander continue walking, and she asks about Larry, and Xander immediately starts acting weird and awkward and very, oh, I'm straight. I have to talk about a gay person, you know. And he assures Buffy that Larry's not the werewolf. Mm-hmm. And they decide they're at square one, and Xander, tells her she's the defender of everything, and she'll figure it out. And Buffy's like, tell that to Teresa. I should have defended her. And then she thinks, wait a second. Mm-hmm. The news linked Teresa to the animal attacks, but we just assumed that it was a werewolf. And so they go to the funeral home, and guess what? It was a vampire.
Yes. Even though her body should be mauled.
Yeah. But her body is laying there in the coffin, and like it's got a scarf around the neck. And Buffy removes the scarf, and it is like the coroner, embalmer, whoever it is that prepares a body, just didn't do anything except put a scarf around the neck. Like, they didn't even try to hide these vampire bodies. They're like, oh, it's a vampire again. Where's the scarf?
I mean, they gotta do quick turnarounds in that place.
Apparently, like, it's so obvious, and you're like, well, they didn't even try to hide that.
They just have a bin of scarves.
Yeah.
I just want to know, like, when do they start thinking, man, we should probably take precautions and, like, put a stake in them? Because if they turn into a vampire, then they're automatically dusted. But if they don't, no harm, no foul, right?
Right. Because I have questions in, like, 2 or 3 minutes about how are they going to explain to the family.
I will say, anytime that Buffy's in a funeral home, there's going to be a vampire that rises from a casket. Like, that happens anytime Buffy. So you know that these people who have been preparing these bodies have occasionally had a vampire just pop out of the coffins.
Okay, so they go and start writing in the guest book, and then Teresa starts to rise behind them. Mm-hmm. And she jumps on Buffy, and they start fighting, and Buffy is about to stake her, and she says, Angel sends his love. And Buffy just kind of freezes. She's in shock. She can't do anything. And Teresa knocks the stake away and is about to bite Buffy when Xander stakes Teresa with an easel. Mm-hmm. And Xander helps her up, and she falls into his arms. She's upset, talking about Angel. He's not going to stop. They pull away, and there's...
Say it.
What?
There's... What are you going to say?
Well, there's kind of a moment. Except...
So?
What we see in the episode is not all that was originally supposed to be in the episode.
Okay, so what's in the script?
Okay, so in the script is... Buffy pulls away from Xander, and they have a long look and stare at each other for just a little bit too long. And Buffy whispers, "Xander, thank you." And they stare at each other for another few minutes, or for another few moments, just a little bit too long again. And then Buffy says, "Well, I have a lot to do tonight. I should probably go." And then she heads out. And then Xander, he says, "Oh no, my life's not too complicated."
Mm-hmm. Which is awful to say about the girl that was just attacked by her ex-boyfriend's leftovers. Because clearly Buffy's life is way more complicated than Xander's. But...
Well, I mean, I think he's
I get
thinking about the attraction.
I get it.
They share a moment.
Yeah, they share a moment. And this is, in fact, the moment that I teased about a while back, but in this episode I wanted to talk about. Because, as you know, this watch through, I've been examining the Buffy-Xander relationship way more than I've ever bothered to in the past. And that Xander thank you, I think, definitely comes off of the "when she was bad, did I ever thank you for saving my life, don't you wish I would?" I think that's definitely connected there. And so there's some through line there that they're trying to do to play up this relationship that never happens. I did.
Well, because they cut it out of the script.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the relationship itself never happens. But I did read, Nicholas Brendan confirmed that there were conversations as late as season 7 about getting Buffy and Xander together. It just never happened. But it was always a discussion about whether or not to bring those two characters together. That's why I was talking about it being like the ultimate what-if relationship, right?
Yeah. I think I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if there was ever a time I would have accepted that.
Yeah, I think their relationship in early season 7 has a good foundation for that. But we're not there yet. And, you know, it'll be a very long time before we get there. And we get to see this journey throughout between now and then. Yeah.
I'm just trying to decide if I would have accepted that in early season 7. Because I was very much shipping Buffy Spike.
Yeah.
At that point.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know that I would have accepted.
You've been like, no.
Yeah. So it could have worked. Okay. Let's not get into that now.
No, that's too far. We've got way too much that we still need to cover in this episode, and I have my whole spiel that I have to talk about here. Okay. So, what I have discovered about myself is that every now and again I get really invested in TV tropes and like different storylines that play around with TV tropes. And I've never really thought about how much Buffy and Xander play with the two most ridiculed TV tropes that were very popular in this time and have more recently become something that people see as a very negative thing. And that's the trope of the nice guy, the quote-unquote nice guy, and the not like other girls girl. And Xander is definitely the nice guy trope. He's the unlucky in love, even though he's like all like, oh, I do everything I can to help and everything like that. But he has all of those things about the nice guy that tend to be overlooked in the nice guy trope. Has a agenda, kind of tries to force things to happen, kind of is controlling about the women in his life, and is just overcompensates a lot. Like, that's very common for the nice guy trope, and that's why it's been ridiculed so much in recent years, even though a lot of times the nice guy would get the girl in a lot of movies that explore that trope. And the reason that it's been dissected and ridiculed is that the fact is a lot of times the nice guys aren't actually nice. They're more of a nerd fantasy is kind of like the idea that is explored a lot, is the idea of a writers living vicariously through their work and putting themselves in the story as, oh, I'm this nerdy guy and I'm going to get the girl in this movie kind of deal. Xander, who is in fact a representation of Joss Whedon, can confirm, never gets with Buffy. And I think that that's the right decision. Because of this nice guy trope attitude and things like that. I don't really think that Xander is the right fit for Buffy ever. I'm interested to explore it, and like I said, I could kind of see it in season 7 that he might get to a point where he's mature enough, but there's still stuff in season 7 that I don't like about Xander, and don't think that they're on the same level even at that point.
Yeah, I'm not saying I think that it would have been right. I was just wondering if I could have accepted it.
It could have even accepted it, yeah. Like, I understood that. But I think I've presented myself like I could be kind of pro Buffy and Xander. I don't think I am. The more I analyze it, I think that it's the right move because of this nice guy trope. Because I don't think his behavior to women is correct. And I don't think he should be rewarded by getting to finish the series off in a relationship with Buffy. I think that's the wrong messaging. I especially don't like the ending of the series for Xander the way it is, but if they had gone the direction of Xander and Buffy being together, I think it would have been even worse. But Buffy's Not Like Other Girls is something that the show has fought against the entire time, and even back in the movie, there's that line where Luke Perry's like, "You're not like other girls, Buffy," and she's all like, "Yes, I am." So, like, they've always fought against that trope. They're not as good as fighting against the nice guy trope as they are the not like other girls trope. But Buffy definitely is not like other girls, right? She is the chosen one, yet Buffy herself is like, I want to do girly things. And she, says that includes dating and, stopping the world from unspeakable evil, or whatever that quote is later on in season 3. Yeah. Like, she understands that she can clump all that together and still be a girl. So that works really well. What is interesting is that it is very typical for the nice guy to end up with the not like other girls girl. That is a very common pairing. In fact, there is a Netflix series called Love, which deconstructs these tropes and really explores this idea of these two characters and the relationship that always seems to happen. So it's interesting that Xander and Buffy are perfectly set up to be this stereotypical couple. And they play with that, and they even have moments like this, and like subtle things that have happened here or there, and then Xander's obvious like undying affection for Buffy, and Buffy's constant rejection, and like in any other scenario, there's many shows that are guilty of it, that eventually these two are going to end up together, and they just never do. They get close, and they become so important to each other, but it never really becomes romantic, at least never really for Buffy, and I think that is the best thing that they could have done, the best decision that they could have done when playing with these tropes. And I am really, really glad, the more I've analyzed it and the more I've pulled it apart, that that's the route that they went. There's still a lot of stuff that I wish they could have improved with Xander, but at least he didn't end up with Buffy at the end of the series. That's what I can say.
I was just kind of trying to point out that in this scene in the script book, they made it a lot more obvious that it was supposed to be a kind of attraction type moment.
Yeah.
For both of them.
Yeah.
For not just Xander, for Buffy too.
And what I will say, and I haven't really pointed them out, but there's moments where Buffy knowing what Buffy knows. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being a touchy-feely person and not actually, like, you're not leading on a guy by, like, complimenting them or hooking their arm in a friendly, flirty way. But Buffy knows how Xander feels about her. And there's been a couple of moments where, like in Inca Mummy Girl, she specifically pauses to compliment and say he looks good. There's a moment in Reptile Boy where she, like, hooks his arm when they're just casually, like, next to each other, and it's just like, I'm hanging out with my friends, and she's, like, kind of just, like, increasing their closeness for no real reason. And I don't know how much of that is just, Sarah and Nikki got along, and so there's just kind of natural things that they do that they did on set, or if it's directional decisions where they were kind of trying to build that, okay, maybe there is a relationship here bubbling under the surface that they just wanted to plant seeds for in case it ever came about. But I will say, me having experienced knowing that a guy likes me that I don't like back, I am very careful not to lead them on in any way.
Well, were you friends with that guy?
Yes.
Like really close friends?
I mean, not as close as Buffy and Xander, but definitely guys that I saw every day in college.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Which, honestly, it could have been leading to that point, and where the writers were leaving it open and stuff. But it's not so, except for this scene.
Yeah.
It's not so obvious that you would think it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
But this is definitely, the part that was cut out is definitely amplifying this idea that Buffy has attraction for Xander, which I think is also interesting, leading back to my initial discussion about how maybe if Willow wasn't there, that would have been a relationship she would have been willing to pursue more than she ever did, because obviously Willow has such strong feelings for Xander, and Buffy loves Willow to death. Like, she would never do anything to hurt Willow kind of deal. Like, immediately she's just like, I want to be friends with this girl. Screw Cordelia. This is the girl for me. And she, you know, in my mind is at that moment when she realizes that Willow has those feelings for Xander, she's just like, I will never have those feelings for Xander because I don't want to hurt Willow.
Right.
So, like, even if they played with this more and showed occasional subtle hints of Buffy's attraction to Xander, I don't think that it would have ever played well until much, much, much later. Like when they're in their 30s. Because I don't think they were even close to it at the end of the series when they're in their early 20s. They weren't there emotionally for each other. They were, like, as much as they were at each other's throats in parts of season 6, I'm just like, no. And that's coming off of somebody who ships Buffy, but Buffy is designed as a toxic relationship, and it takes a lot of rebuilding to get to anywhere that's even kind of trust again. Whereas I think if they had done Xander and Buffy at the end of the series, it wouldn't have taken all of that toxicity into account as much. I think it would have just been like, oh, kind of a weird shoehorned happy ending, which I think is why Joss Whedon didn't go that route, because he couldn't figure out a way to make it work that wasn't forced. And I think it would have been a forced relationship.
I agree.
All right, well, we've talked about that forever. Let's move on. So, Kane is making silver bullets in his van, just in case you wanted to be reminded that he exists and is, in fact, a jerk. Oz apparently has a connection to get shackles, which is cool. And he is just openly, like, locking himself up in, like, the family room of his house. So, also questions about his parents.
Yeah, like, where is his mom and dad? I'm assuming he's an only child, as lots of pretty much everyone.
Lots of pretty much everyone, yep.
Well, they're all only children. I guess Tara's not later. But Oz, Willow, Xander, and Buffy until season 5 are all only children.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of weird they didn't think to give anyone siblings. But anyway, Oz is, yes, locking himself up in the living room.
Mm-hmm. He hears knocking and he starts to ignore it, but then decides to answer it instead. And
which makes no sense.
Yeah. What also doesn't make sense is the fact that it's already, like, night. Like, if you know that you're gonna turn into a werewolf and you don't know the exact timeline, wouldn't you have already locked yourself up at this point?
Yeah.
I would have been extra precautious.
Shackles on his wrist, but the chains aren't really hooked to anything. Like, he didn't think this through.
No. So, this scene is great. I'm gonna put, like, just the sound clip in of all of it, because I think Willow's delightful in it. Willow's just inability to explain her feelings in a rational way.
I had this whole thing worked out, and I had it written down, but then it didn't make any sense when I was reading it back.
Willow, this is not a very good time.
I mean, what am I supposed to think? First, you buy me popcorn, and then you're all glad that I didn't get bit. And you put the tag back in my shirt. But I guess none of that means anything, because instead of looking up names with me, here you are, all alone in your house doing nothing by yourself.
Willow, we'll talk about this tomorrow.
No! Damn it! We'll talk about this now. Buffy told me that sometimes what a girl makes has to be the first move, and now that I'm saying this, I'm starting to think that the written version sounded pretty good, but you know what I mean.
I know, it's me. I'm going through some changes.
Well, welcome to the world. Things happen. Don't you think I'm going through a lot?
Not like me.
Oh, what? So now you're special? You're a special boy. With chains and stuff? Why do you have chains and stuff?
Although near the end, I kind of feel like Willow is not catching on near fast enough.
Oh,
So, yeah.
I mean, to be fair, until you see the chains and stuff, she's so in her own headspace, she's not even paying attention to Oz, I don't think.
Yeah.
But then there's also the funny, like, he starts to be like, don't get near me, get away, and then he, like, falls behind the couch and starts to change, and we can see him changing, and Willow's just slowly creeping up, being like, are you okay? And then again, I feel like it's just like a rule with the werewolf that he has to just pop up. He has to drop down or pop up from somewhere anytime he's revealed.
Yeah.
But he pops up from behind the couch, and Willow runs out and hops a freaking fence and then smacks Oz with a metal trash can as he tries to follow over the fence. I mean, props to Willow.
Yeah, she is a very very good fighter here.
And then we have this short little scene of Kane driving, and he hears a howl, and he says, "There you are." And I'm like, is there just no dogs in Sunnydale? you know that howl has to be the werewolf? There's, I guess maybe, yeah. There's a very specific tone to the howl of a werewolf that he's familiar with because he's killed so many. He's just that good at his job. So here you have this weird misdirect that we kind of skipped over earlier, where they like purposefully kept it from the audience what Giles's backup plan was. And you have Giles assembling this gun, and it's a tranquilizer gun, we come to find out. But they have like this weird like, oh, they're actually gonna kill the werewolf, and it's Oz, oh no. It's just more unnecessary tension. It's like the whole Kane storyline. It's just to add more unnecessary tension when one of your like main characters, even though he's not in the credits yet, but he'll eventually become a main character. One of your main characters that everybody's already invested in is dealing with being a werewolf. And we barely get any time of just him dealing with being a werewolf. I was just like, I feel like there's ways to create tension without, oh, Giles and Buffy are gonna kill Oz, or just...
Yeah.
But yeah, he is assembling the gun. Buffy comes in and says that sorry she's late, but she had to do some slayage in the form of Teresa, and that Angel sent her as a gift. And Giles starts to comfort her, and this is the one line where I kind of can see that Buffy's just bottling her emotions and trying to distract herself, because she talks about like she'll have a good cry later after they bag a werewolf.
You know, sometimes things are bad enough you can't really handle sympathy.
Yeah. And like
you'll lose it.
Yeah. And I can definitely buy that. I feel like that's not presented in the episode any other place but right here. And it might have been better to like show that a little bit more. Maybe slightly subtly when she was talking about how she had gone like a whole 2 minutes without thinking about Angel, to just kind of show that she is constantly aware of what has happened, but she's just trying to distract herself with other things in order to survive, because we all know how emotional Buffy gets about Angel. So, like, that's just her only coping mechanism. But yeah, so Giles checks the scope, and then we cut back to Willow running through the woods with the werewolf in pursuit. And this is when we have that weird moment where she falls, and then the werewolf kind of just smells something and wanders off when she's like 2 feet in front of him.
Yeah, it's weird.
And then Willow gets up and runs back to the library, and Buffy and Giles are standing in like the exact same spots. So that was a weird choice editing wise.
Yeah.
But what's even funnier, this is another like weird blooper I discovered when I was watching it. Sometimes in this scene, Giles is wearing his glasses and sometimes he is not.
Well, I mean, he takes his glasses off a lot, so.
But between each crosscut...
Good point. Very good point.
Yeah, everything shot from one angle, he doesn't have his glasses on, and then from the other angle, he does. And it's just kind of fun to watch them pop onto his face and then pop back off.
Yeah, that doesn't work. Giles and Buffy are discussing how they'll find the werewolf, And Willow bursts into the library screaming, "It's Oz, it's Oz." And Buffy's like, "What's Oz?" Willow says, "The werewolf." And they ask her if she's certain, and she's like, "You should trust me on this, because, you know."
He said he was going through all these changes, then he went through all these changes.
Then they talk about how he's in the woods, and Buffy's like, "Oh, okay, let's go." And then they see the rifle, and Willow kind of freaks out. "You're not going to kill him?" "Yeah, he's a werewolf, but I bet he doesn't mean to be." I love. And Buffy's like, "Don't worry, we won't hurt him. It's phenobarbital, and it's enough to put down a small elephant."
Mm-hmm. Which is the second comparison to elephants and werewolves.
Yeah. Okay, so they go out into the woods, and they're looking, and we see Kane looking through his scope, sighting in on Oz, and he's about to fire and is kind of tackled by Buffy.
She like flying kicks into him.
Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Okay. He misses, and Buffy and Kane kind of fight over the rifle. The werewolf heads toward them as they're fighting over the rifle, and Buffy gets it away and hits him in the stomach with it. And then the werewolf leaps onto Buffy. And Buffy, I want to point, is the first person he's actually tried to hurt. He runs away from all others, even dead ones. But with Buffy, he attacks.
Yeah. It's just like if Buffy's in a funeral home, there's going to be a vampire.
Yeah. They continue fighting, and Buffy goes flying through the air into Willow and Giles, and during the fight, Willow grabs the tranquilizer gun and fires it and hits Oz. So she's the one that does it and tranquilizes Oz.
And
she goes, "I shot Oz."
Yeah, she says, "I shot Oz," which I love because we talked about like the humanity through line, and there's one more beat that we're going to hit on this, but the humanity through line of how they kind of start off, oh, it's a human that doesn't know what's going on, and then as they think, oh, it's killed Teresa, and Buffy's trying to like get more and more comfortable with the idea of what she may have to do, they start referring to it as it, and it becomes more monstrous, and then when they find out that it's Oz and that Teresa was killed by Angel and not by the werewolf and all of that, then it goes back to being human, right? And she's like, "I shot Oz." So it's an interesting, again, it's another interesting little thing that they play with, but it's just crammed in this episode with so many other things that I'm not sure if they quite put the message out there the way that they should have. They didn't develop it enough.
Then Kane walks over to him, and he says, "No wonder this town is overrun with monsters. No one here is man enough to kill them."
Mm-hmm.
But like, how does he know the town's overrun with monsters? He just knows there's a werewolf. That's one monster. It's not really overrun. What's he been doing in town? I have questions. Where did he stay? Who is he?
He stayed in his van. He lives in his van.
Okay. Well, what other monsters has he run into? Can we get the Adventures of Kane?
No, I don't want that at all. That sounds terrible.
I'm kind of curious, though.
The less of this guy I get, the better. Anyway.
Buffy says, "I wouldn't be so sure about that." And then there is a little thing that Buffy says that was cut out.
Okay.
It says, "You know, Mr. Kane, I've been sick of you since the moment I met you. And I've been waiting for just the right opportunity to take you on. But then I realized, a big strong man versus a little girl like me." And then she uses all of her strength to bend the rifle, which we get to see in the episode. But all these words are cut out. She goes, "It wouldn't be a fair fight." And then that's when she tosses at him and tells him to, get out of town.
Yeah.
But they cut a little bit of that out.
Yeah, this episode really plays with those gender stereotypes. And it seems to do it more so in favor of the female. It is a feminist show, so I can kind of understand that. There's a lot of representations of toxic masculinity in this particular episode. But yeah, there's still things that, while it's trying to be like, don't underestimate the girl, and like has this Kane character who be like, Buffy's a girl, she can't do anything, and then have this moment at the end where she bends his gun. No metaphors there. she has this moment of kind of giving him his comeuppance and all of that. But then it's also in an episode where you have all of these weird female stereotypes that are in here as well. So it seems like it's almost contradicting itself, where Willow's like, we all gotta be meek girly girls, right? Like, you've gotta be a meek girly girl like the rest of us. It's not just like you gotta be a meek girly girl, you have to be a meek girly girl like the rest of us. And just, like, confirming certain stereotypes there as well. It's, I don't know, like, I just can't with this episode. The more I think about it, the more things irritate me. So, Buffy checks on Willow, who is checking on Oz, and she asks if he's going to be okay. And then, I actually like this line. I just like the delivery. He says he'll be a little sore in the morning, but he'll be Oz with that beautiful Giles smile.
Oh.
Aww.
Okay, and then we skip to the next day, and it's Xander and Buffy talking, and Xander is talking about how weird it is to see him again, and I can't look at him the same way, and Buffy's like, he's still a human being most of the time, and Xander stops, and he's like, what are we talking about? And Buffy's like, Oz, what are you talking about? And so Xander says, nobody. So Xander is still fixated on Larry being gay.
How did this conversation happen to where one of them thought it was Oz and one of them thought it was Larry that they were talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, like how the beginning of the conversation that we missed.
Yeah.
Then we have Larry, who walks through and passes a couple of his friends, and they knock some books out of a girl's arms, and Larry stops and says, let me get those for you, and picks them up for her and gives them to her, which is kind of like the bookend of what happened at the beginning when he did that and then made comments about her bending over. But I want to point out something really funny. The group of friends that hang out around Larry at the beginning and here, they're called the Larryettes.
The Larryettes.
Yep, Larry passes a couple of his Larryettes.
That's amazing. I love that. So, here's a weird thing that I noticed. Because we've already kind of talked about the weirdness that is Larry's story arc, where he confesses to Xander, and suddenly that's enough for him to, like, backpedal on all of his, toxic masculine ways of trying to cover up who he really is. After having one conversation with Xander. But it's also in an episode where Cordelia is suddenly just super open about her relationship with Xander in front of the whole school, even though nothing's really changed other than Willow caught him kissing one time, and so Willow and Buffy and the immediate Scoobies know, but not the rest of the school. So, like...
Yeah, and it's not like that group doesn't have secrets.
Yeah, like, does Xander have this weird ability for people to just forget why they're trying to hide stuff? Or is this some kind of magical power that we've never discovered about Xander, where he can just have a single conversation with people, or like certainly eventually get people to where they're just like, okay, we're now comfortable with this side of ourselves that we've been hiding?
I will say very recently I watched a reaction video of several episodes from season 6 of someone watching them and reacting to them. And I can't remember the name of it. The one right after Tabula Rasa, where Willow figures out how to turn Amy back into a person from a rat.
Okay, that is Smash. That was the first episode that I watched.
Okay, Smashed. In that episode, and the only reason that I think I made this connection is because I just recently watched it. But in that episode, Buffy is talking to Amy after she's turned back into a rat. And Amy is talking about how she thinks Larry might ask her to prom. And Buffy says, okay, a couple of things. First of all, Larry's gay. Second, Larry's dead. And it occurred to me that Amy doesn't actually turn into a rat till like mid-season 3. Mm-hmm. So wouldn't she know that Larry is gay?
Yeah, there's a scene. We'll have to watch for it. There's a scene where Larry tells Xander that he's out to everybody. Like he's got his grandmother hooking him up, right?
Graduation.
Okay, so that's that. Like, I'm not sure when the shift is, because he's not out to everybody immediately.
No, it's not graduation. It's earshot.
Earshot.
Yeah.
Okay.
When they're looking.
When they're looking for. But that's definitely after Gingerbread, right? So
yes, that's
it could
definitely after Gingerbread.
possibly fit the timeline.
Yeah, but he's acting so... The reason I thought of it is because he's acting so different here.
Yeah.
It's like he doesn't... The whole act...
We'll have to watch Larry.
So, yeah, the whole act of being so aggressive to women and acting the way he was done so nobody would suspect that he's gay.
Well, what it was... here's the answer. He's now super sensitive, and that's why Amy's interested. He's just not out yet, but he's super sensitive.
Right, but I'm talking about with everybody. He's not putting on that act anymore. How does he explain it to, like, the Larryettes? Who are going to want to know, like, why?
Listen, the Larryettes don't have enough brain cells to know the difference.
That's very possible. It's just something I was thinking about when I was watching the episode. Like, Amy should have already known that because this happened way before Gingerbread.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was earshot when he says that. But okay, we can keep going.
Where the heck were we?
Larry walks up to Xander and just kind of thanks him for the talk. And Xander's like, yeah, no, we don't have to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Not ever. And then Buffy says that was weird. And Xander kind of goes on a rant about what? It's okay for a guy to like a guy just because they have to be in the locker room when nothing happened. And it's weird and awkward and just kind of like, chill, Xander. Nobody thinks you're gay.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Buffy.
And then they start talking about Willow and Oz. And Xander goes into this whole thing about their relationship and what kind of life could they possibly have and obedience school and paper training. And it's like, yeah, he comes up with these future scenarios for like all the females in his life.
Yeah,
about why
it's just like, this is like exactly like the blood belly and the thinking the vampire of the night is still sexy or whatever the heck he said last episode. Like, it is exactly the same scenario here.
Yeah.
And it feels like he's coming up with this like on the spot, like he's just, his brain is programmed this way.
Yeah. And then Buffy's like, no, that won't happen. And Xander's like, she's not safe with him if it was up to me. And then Buffy basically flat out tells him it's not up to you.
Yes.
And we
seg
to... Huh?
I said, which is good. Yay, Buffy.
Yeah. And then we go to Willow and Oz talking.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do this one.
So yeah, Willow approaches Oz, and a note that I love, that I cherish deeply, is that Oz is kind of talking to her about how Giles explained how the werewolf works and how he will have to lock himself up and all of that. And he said, only he used more words. And a globe.
Yeah, I love it. That one made me laugh too.
And then they have this lovely exchange of, sorry I shot you, it's okay, sorry I almost ate you, it's okay. It's just so precious.
They're so cute in this. And Oz kind of basically is like, okay, well, I'll stay out of your way from now on. And Willow's like, no, I kind of like you.
Yes.
Get in my way. And Oz is kind of in shock.
You mean you'd still...
Well, I like you. You're nice. And you're funny. And you don't smoke. Yeah, okay, werewolf. But that's not all the time. I mean, 3 days out of the month, I'm not much fun to be around either.
You are quite the human.
So, I'd still if you'd still.
I'd very still.
Okay. No biting now.
Agreed.
I have Willow establishes her boundaries at the very beginning of the relationship. That's very important.
No biting. Yeah. And then he says agreed, and she walks off, and then she runs back and kisses him.
Mm-hmm.
And then takes off again. And then Oz says a werewolf in love, which I don't like because it's so corny.
Yeah, I was about to say, everything about this last little bit is super cheesy. Like, it's got like the cheesy music that comes up, and it's just so like, you can see it beat by beat. And then a werewolf in love, and I'm just like, if this was anyone other than these two,
I love this ending scene. I think it's so sweet the way they talk to each other and the way they figure things out and stuff. And I think it's adorable. The only part that I'm like, this is too cheesy. You didn't need to do this is the werewolf in love part. I'm like, really, Oz? That's just not you.
Yeah.
But the rest I love.
What they should have done is she should have ran up, kissed him, ran off, him stare off wistfully at her, and then goes, huh. That would have been Oz.
Yeah, that would have been Oz, not a werewolf in love. Because, like, I mean, this is the morning after what happened. He's still only known he's a werewolf for, like, less than 24 hours. Well, maybe a little over 24 hours.
Yeah. Maybe
around 30 hours. Like, there's some processing and some unpacking to do. Not just like a werewolf in love. That shows a level of acceptance.
Yeah.
About his new condition that I just don't think would be there yet.
He's just of that if you can't fight him, join him mentality.
Well, even someone as indifferent and cool as Oz would take some time with being a werewolf.
Well, and he even has
more than 30 hours.
He even has that line, like, you're quite the human.
Yeah.
As if and also like, accepting that he is not human anymore. So, like, it's, like, he's just fully accepting it at this point.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And also, like, at what time of the night was he shot with enough phenobarbital to bring down a small elephant? Because, I mean, it seems like it's the beginning of the school day.
Yeah.
First of all, why is he even in school? I mean, I think I'd take a couple of days off. If I discovered I was a werewolf and was hit with a tranquilizer.
What's funny is he shows this much commitment to come to school today, yet we know that he fails this year because he doesn't go to any of his classes. What is he doing all day? He's always at school.
Yeah, watching Willow? But, like, is he even completely recovered from the tranquilizer? Is he still...
I have no idea.
Experiencing the effects of it?
Maybe that's why he says a werewolf in love. Maybe that's it. It's the trank.
It doesn't make sense. But I mean, I'm at least taking a day off school if I discover I'm a werewolf. I might drop out altogether. I don't know.
I mean, he's a senior. He can get a GED. It'd be fine.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, that was Phases. The very first episode I watched.
Yay! Somehow we spent more time talking about this one than Innocence.
Every time there's an episode where I think I didn't take a whole lot of notes on this one. This will probably be a quick one. We talked for like 3 hours. I never know which ones we're going to... And like the big ones that I think are going to take 3 hours... Like, we finished talking about in an hour or an hour and a half. It's weird. I can't predict it.
You never know what we're going to come up with. Next week, I also predict to be long-winded. Let's see if I'm wrong. But Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered is what we're going to be discussing next week, which will continue to the reasons why Xander is problematic.
Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered is one of my least favorites.
Haha, good.
So cringy. To me, just like, I don't. It's actually one of the ones that I skip sometimes during a watch through.
Great, we can hate on it together. It'll be glorious.
We'll see how I feel about it watching it again because some of these, what I think about them changes as I'm watching them this time.
Mm-hmm. That deep analysis, man.
I think that might be it.
And it's also, I think, spacing them out more. I think that's a big thing because when I watched a lot of these earlier seasons, it was because I had them on DVD. And I watched them through, like, back to back to back to back. Because I was just like, I'm going to catch up on Buffy so fast.
That's kind of me, too, because I have binge watched through the Buffy series so many times. Like, before the DVDs were available for purchase, I had tapes. Mm-hmm. There was, like, 40 of them. Where I had taped all the episodes off of regular TV and syndication, commercials and everything.
Back in the good old days.
Watch them all the time. And then the DVDs came out and I bought those and now I watch it on Hulu. But when I do watch it, it's on, but I'm never sitting analyzing it, taking notes and stuff. It's just my favorite episodes, like I'll sit down and actually watch, but mostly it's just on while I'm doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be cooking dinner or folding laundry or doing stuff around the house, playing on my phone, doing anything.
Yeah.
While it's on and I'm watching it. It kind of in the background. And it's different watching it and analyzing it and taking notes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think except for the very first time when I watched it when it was on TV, the first time, and then maybe once or twice watching through them, I've never actually sat down and watched. It's always just been on.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I've done that dozens of times.
Yeah.
So it's very different, and shows that episodes that I think that I didn't like at all, I'm like, hey, that was actually pretty good. And ones that I thought I loved, I'm like, yeah, I didn't like that much. So I remember Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered pretty much every time I've watched it as one. It's so cringy and I just can't stand it. So I might have something more to say next week or something different to say next week.
Yeah. There are episodes of Buffy that I haven't watched in years. And Go Fish is one of them. And that is coming up. And I am not looking forward to it.
I remember Go Fish. It's... Yep. Well, that was Phases.
That was Phases.
A lot of tangents, apparently.
Lots and lots of tangents. Thank you all so much for listening. And this is where we say bye.
Bye.